Steve M. Fox thought he could buy his way out of every problem he ever faced. He had the penthouse apartments, the private jets, a bank account with more zeros than most people see in a lifetime. He even had the kind of power that made grown men nervous when he walked into a room. He had everything: money, power, respect. But he didn't have what mattered most. Would he ever? As he stands over this grave, this fresh mound of earth that swallowed the only person who ever truly loved him, he realizes something terrifying. He's bankrupt. Not in money, in something far more valuable. Because the man buried 6 feet below him gave up everything to save Steve's life, and Steve didn't even know it was him. This is Tom's letter. Steve's little brother, the brother he abandoned, the brother he called a burden, the brother who, despite everything, donated his kidney to save Steve's life, and then died because of it. But Steve only found out 3 days ago. Let me take you back to where this tragedy really began.
Steve and Tom Fox were born with absolutely nothing. Their father left when they were 5 and 3. Their mother worked 3 jobs just to keep the lights on. Some nights there wasn't enough food for everyone, so she'd pretend she wasn't hungry and give her portions to the boys. The 2 brothers made a promise that cold December night when they were huddled under the same thin blanket because the heat had been shut off. Tom, the younger one, looked up at Steve with those wide, trusting eyes and said, "We'll always have each other's backs, right, Steve? No matter what?" Steve squeezed his little brother's hand. "Always, Tommy. You and me against the world." That promise lasted exactly 18 years, because the moment Steve tasted success, he forgot where he came from. He forgot the cold nights. He forgot his mother's sacrifice, and worst of all, he forgot Tom. Steve was brilliant, ruthless, the kind of man who saw opportunities where others saw obstacles. By 28, he'd built a tech startup from his college dorm room and sold it for $47 million. By 32, he'd tripled that fortune through real estate investments. By 35, Steve M. Fox was a name whispered in boardrooms across the country, a billionaire, a titan, untouchable. But success came with a price. While Steve was deciding which yacht to buy for his summer home in the Hamptons, Tom was working double shifts at a warehouse just to keep his landlord from evicting him. While Steve was featured on the cover of Forbes, Tom was getting his electricity shut off for the 3rd time that year. The brothers lived in the same city, 15 miles apart, but they might as well have been on different planets. Tom tried to stay connected. He really did. He'd call on Steve's birthday. Steve wouldn't answer. He'd show up at Steve's office during the holidays just to say hello. Steve's assistant would turn him away. One time, Tom made it past security. He walked into Steve's glass-walled office, nervous, holding a birthday card he'd made by hand because he couldn't afford to buy one. Steve was on a conference call. He didn't even look up. He just slid a crisp $100 bill across his marble desk and said, "Take it and don't come back this month, Tom. I'm busy. I have investors waiting." Tom stood there for a moment, staring at his older brother, the one who used to protect him from bullies, who used to split his last piece of bread with him, now treating him like a beggar. He took the money, not because he wanted it, but because he needed it, and he left without saying a word. That was 3 years before Steve's world fell apart. Then Isabella entered Steve's life like a perfectly timed storm. She wasn't just beautiful, she was strategic. Isabella Moretti had a master's degree in psychology and a talent for reading people like they were open books. She knew exactly what Steve wanted before he said a word. She met him at a charity gala, the kind Steve only attended for networking and tax write-offs. While his wife Amanda was at home, taking care of their 2 kids, Steve was mesmerized by this woman who laughed at all his jokes, who made him feel young again, who told him he was more than just successful, he was extraordinary.
Isabella was patient, calculated. She never pushed, she just planted seeds. Your wife doesn't really understand what it takes to build an empire like yours, does she? You work so hard, Steve. You deserve someone who appreciates your ambition. Family can hold you back from your true potential. Sometimes the people who love you are the ones who limit you. Steve listened, and slowly those seeds grew into something poisonous. He started seeing his family as obligations, inconveniences, remnants of a past life he'd outgrown. His wife Amanda? She was boring. She didn't care about his business deals. She just wanted him home for dinner. His kids? They were needy, always wanting his time when he had empires to run. And Tom? Tom was the worst reminder of all, a living, breathing memory of the poverty Steve had crawled out of. 6 months after meeting Isabella, Steve filed for divorce. He moved out of the family home, the one Amanda had turned into a warm, loving space for their children, and into a chrome and glass penthouse that looked more like a museum than a home. Isabella moved in 3 weeks later.
If you're watching this right now, I need your help with something. My father once told me that stories about real sacrifice and family would never reach people, that nobody cares about these lessons anymore. But I believe he's wrong. I believe stories like Steve and Tom's matter, because they remind us what we risk losing when we chase the wrong things. If this story is hitting you the way it's hitting me, help me prove that these lessons still matter. A simple like, a share, or even just watching to the end tells me you're listening. Let's show that humanity still values what truly counts. Amanda didn't fight him for money. She just asked for enough to keep the kids stable. Tom heard about the divorce through social media. He tried to call Steve. The number had been changed. He sent an email. It bounced back. Steve M. Fox had erased every connection to his past, family, roots, humanity. And Isabella? She smiled and called it liberation. But neither of them knew what was coming. Neither of them knew that in 18 months, Steve's perfect new life would shatter, and the man he'd thrown away like garbage would be the only thing standing between him and death.
You can't negotiate with kidney failure. It was a Tuesday morning in March when Steve M. Fox learned that all his billions couldn't buy him the one thing he desperately needed: time. He'd been feeling off for weeks, fatigue, nausea, swelling in his legs. He ignored it. Powerful men don't get sick, they push through. But when he collapsed during a board meeting and woke up in a hospital bed with tubes coming out of his arms, reality hit him like a freight train. The nephrologist didn't sugarcoat it. "Mr. Fox, your kidneys are failing. End-stage renal disease, both of them. You need a transplant, and you need it soon." Steve's first response was what you'd expect from a billionaire. "How much? I'll pay whatever it takes. Get me to the top of the list, today." The doctor shook his head slowly. "Money doesn't work that way here, Mr. Fox. There are over 90,000 people waiting for a kidney transplant in this country. The average wait time is 3 to 5 years. You have about 6 months.
He could buy islands, private jets, entire companies, but he couldn't buy this. Who could save him now? For the first time in 2 decades, Steve M. Fox was facing a problem he couldn't solve with money. He could buy islands, he could buy politicians, he could buy anything with a price tag,
but he couldn't buy someone else's kidney. The only real option was a living donor, someone who loved him enough to give up a part of themselves, someone with a compatible blood type and tissue match, someone from his family. His ex-wife? Not a match. Plus, she'd made it clear she was done helping him after what he'd put her through. His children? Too young, and he'd been such an absent father they barely knew him anyway. His extended family? He'd burned those bridges years ago. And Tom? Steve hadn't spoken to Tom in over 3 years. Steve was alone in his hospital room at night, his phone on the bedside table, the screen dark. No calls, no messages, nobody coming to save him. Steve looked at Isabella, the woman he'd left his family for, the woman he'd promised to build a new life with. "I need you to get tested, see if you're a match." There was a long pause. Isabella's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Steve, I care about you, I really do, but this is a lot. Donating a kidney? That's major surgery, permanent changes to my body. And honestly," she stood up, smoothing her designer dress, "I need to think about myself right now, about my future. This is a lot of stress, and I don't know if I can handle it. I think I need some space." Space. The woman he'd destroyed his family for needed space the moment he became inconvenient. Isabella walked out of that hospital room and never came back. Within a week, Steve's lawyers informed him that Isabella had moved into a penthouse in Miami with another man, a tech entrepreneur from Silicon Valley. She'd already replaced him. That's when Steve understood the difference between the people who love you and the people who love what you can give them. But it was too late. He'd already pushed away everyone who actually cared. Or so he thought. While Steve was drowning in his isolation, something was happening 3 floors below him. Tom Fox had heard about his brother's condition, not from Steve. Steve never called. Tom heard it from a former colleague who saw the news coverage. A business reporter had written a sympathetic piece. Tech billionaire Steve M. Fox battles life-threatening illness. Tom read that article 7 times. He'd spent 3 years trying to hate Steve, trying to accept that his older brother was gone, replaced by some cold corporate stranger. But when he read those words, life-threatening illness, all the hurt, all the rejection, all the $100 bills thrown at him like he was a stray dog, it all dissolved, because Tom remembered the promise, "You and me against the world." Tom called the hospital. "I'd like to be tested as a potential kidney donor for Steve Fox." The coordinator was professional. "Are you family?" "I'm his brother." "Have you discussed this with Mr. Fox?" Tom paused. "No, and I don't want you to tell him it's me. Can we do this anonymously?" There was hesitation on the other end of the line. "That's unusual, but yes, it's possible to remain anonymous. However, I should tell you that living donation is a serious decision. The testing process is extensive, and the surgery carries real risks." "I understand," Tom said quietly. "Test me anyway." The testing took 3 weeks. Blood type, compatible. Tissue match, nearly perfect. Health screening, good. Except for one thing. Tom had a heart condition, a mild arrhythmia that he'd had since childhood. Nothing life-threatening on its own, but it put him at higher risk during surgery. The transplant team was concerned. "Mr. Fox, with your heart condition, the surgery poses additional risks. We'd typically recommend—" Tom cut them off. "I'm healthy enough. I can do this. Please." He didn't tell them about the occasional chest pains, the times his heart would race for no reason. He couldn't risk being disqualified, because in Tom's mind, this wasn't a choice. It was the fulfillment of a promise made 2 decades ago by 2 scared boys under a thin blanket.
Steve was 3 months into dialysis when his doctor walked in with an expression he hadn't seen in weeks. Hope. "Mr. Fox, we found a match, an anonymous living donor. They're willing to proceed with the surgery as soon as possible." Steve's eyes widened. "Who is it?" "The donor wishes to remain anonymous. That's their right. All I can tell you is they're compatible, they're healthy, and they're ready." For a brief moment, just a flicker, Steve wondered if it could be Tom, but he dismissed the thought immediately. Tom hated him. Why would Tom help him? It had to be someone else. Maybe someone who needed money. Maybe he'd secretly paid them through his lawyers. It didn't matter. Steve cried, not out of gratitude, not out of humility. He cried out of relief that his luck hadn't run out. Living kidney donation is an act of profound courage. The recipient's surgery is a celebration, a second chance at life. But the donor's surgery, it's a sacrifice, voluntary trauma, choosing pain and permanent change for someone else's survival.
Tom was being wheeled into the operating room. He was calm, at peace. He looked at the ceiling and whispered something. "Use it well, Steve. The donor always goes first." Tom's surgery started at 6:47 a.m. The transplant team worked carefully, methodically. They began the delicate process of removing his kidney, the one that would save his brother's life. Everything was going perfectly until the monitors screamed. Tom's hidden heart condition, the one he'd lied about to make sure they wouldn't reject him, decided to reveal itself at the worst possible moment. His heart stopped completely. The surgical team rushed into action. Chest compressions, defibrillation, emergency medications. For 43 seconds, Tom was clinically dead. His heart finally restarted, but the damage was catastrophic. The surgery had to continue. They had no choice. The kidney was already disconnected. Tom's kidney was rushed to Steve, who had no idea what was happening 3 floors away, who had no idea his brother was dying to save him. Steve's surgery was flawless, perfect. The new kidney started working immediately. The surgical team called it a miracle, and it was, just not the kind Steve thought.
Tom woke up too, but he never left that ICU bed. The surgery succeeded. His kidney was gone, working perfectly inside Steve's body, giving his brother a second chance at life. But Tom's heart was destroyed. The doctors tried everything, but his heart had been fighting for years, and this final act of love was more than it could bear. Tom knew he was dying. He could feel it, but he didn't panic, didn't scream for help, didn't demand they tell Steve. Instead, he asked for paper and a pen, and he wrote his final words to the brother who'd forgotten him. Steve M. Fox made a full recovery. Within 2 months, he was back in his office, back in his suits, back to his empire. He did a press tour, interviews, a feature in Forbes titled "How I Beat Death: Steve M. Fox's Remarkable Recovery." He talked about his anonymous hero. He called them a selfless stranger who gave me a second chance. He set up a charity fund for kidney disease, tax deductible, of course. He never mentioned that he'd spent weeks trying to find out who the donor was so he could properly compensate them. Because in Steve's mind, everything had a price, even someone's kidney.
He looked for Isabella, sent messages, tried to win her back now that he was healthy and powerful again. She blocked his number. He didn't care. He was Steve M. Fox. He'd survived the impossible. He felt untouchable until a letter arrived. Isabella's assistant placed mail on his desk. One envelope stood out, handwritten, return address, St. Mary's Hospice. Steve almost threw it away. He got hundreds of letters a week, fan mail, business proposals, charity requests. But something made him open this one. Maybe it was the shaky handwriting. Maybe it was the weight of the envelope. Or maybe, deep down, some part of him knew. Dear Steve, if you're reading this, it means you're healthy. I'm glad. I know we haven't spoken in 3 years, and I know you probably don't think about me at all anymore. That's okay. I understand. But I need to tell you something, and I'm running out of time to say it. I was your donor, Steve. The kidney that saved your life, it was mine. I made them promise not to tell you. I knew if you found out it was me, you'd feel guilty, or maybe you'd feel like you owed me something, and I didn't want that. I just wanted you to live.
You probably don't remember this, but when we were kids, when Dad left and Mom was working all those jobs, you used to sleep between me and the door. You said it was because if anyone bad came in, they'd have to go through you first. You were my protector, Steve, my hero. And even though you stopped being that person somewhere along the way, I never stopped seeing you as my brother. I'm not gonna make it, Steve. The surgery, my heart couldn't handle it. I knew it was risky. The doctors warned me, but I did it anyway. Because you're my brother, and brothers don't abandon each other, even when one of them forgets the promise. Steve's hands trembled as he held the letter. Tears streamed down his face. His mouth opened in a silent scream of anguish. He couldn't breathe, couldn't think. His brother, his little brother, the one he'd abandoned, thrown away, treated like garbage, had saved his life and died doing it.
I don't want your money. I never did. I don't want an apology. It's too late for that. I just want you to remember something. The kidney I gave you is a second chance, not just to live, but to be the person I used to know. The Steve who shared his last piece of bread. The Steve who promised we'd always have each other's backs. Use this gift wisely, Steve. Don't waste it on the life you were living. The money, the power, the people who only love what you can give them, none of that matters when you're lying in a hospital bed, wondering if anyone will show up. I showed up. I always would have. I hope you find your way back to the person you used to be, the person I loved, the person I gave my kidney and my life for. You and me against the world, remember? I love you, big brother. Always did. Always will. Tom. The letter fell from Steve's hands onto his desk. He collapsed to his knees, his body racked with sobs. Everything he'd built, everything he'd achieved, all of it was worthless, because the one person who truly loved him was gone, and Steve had never even known he was there.
Steve M. Fox is alive today because of Tom. But Tom is dead because Steve forgot what truly mattered. By the time Steve read that letter, Tom had been gone for 6 weeks, buried in a modest cemetery outside the city. No fancy funeral, no press coverage, just a handful of Tom's co-workers and his mother, who'd outlived both her ex-husband and now her youngest son. Steve hadn't even known. He'd been too busy celebrating his recovery, too busy rebuilding his empire, too busy being grateful to a mysterious anonymous donor,
while his brother was dying alone in a hospice. Steve went to his mother's house. She answered the door, took one look at her eldest son, and said 6 words that shattered what was left of his soul. "He asked about you every day." She didn't slam the door, she didn't yell, she just closed it quietly. And Steve understood. Some debts can never be repaid. Some betrayals can never be forgiven. Some chances only come once.
Steve M. Fox is the richest man he knows. He has the penthouse, the empire, the legacy, and he's never been more alone. Every morning he wakes up and feels Tom's kidney working inside him, keeping him alive, giving him a second chance he doesn't deserve. He donated his entire fortune to kidney disease research. It didn't help. He visits Tom's grave every week. It doesn't bring Tom back. He reached out to his ex-wife and kids. They're civil, but the damage is done. Because here's the truth most people don't learn until it's too late. You don't get to choose when your moment of clarity comes, and sometimes it comes too late. Steve thought he could buy his way out of every debt he ever owed, but there are some debts that can't be paid with money. Some bonds that once broken can never be repaired. Some sacrifices that deserve to be honored, not ignored.
You probably don't remember this, but when we were kids, when Dad left and Mom was working all those jobs, you used to sleep between me and the door. You said it was because if anyone bad came in, they'd have to go through you first. You were my protector, Steve, my hero. And even though you stopped being that person somewhere along the way, I never stopped seeing you as my brother. I'm not gonna make it, Steve. The surgery, my heart couldn't handle it. I knew it was risky. The doctors warned me, but I did it anyway. Because you're my brother, and brothers don't abandon each other, even when one of them forgets the promise. Steve's hands trembled as he held the letter. Tears streamed down his face. His mouth opened in a silent scream of anguish. He couldn't breathe, couldn't think. His brother, his little brother, the one he'd abandoned, thrown away, treated like garbage, had saved his life and died doing it.